Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I'm Joe Rockey, here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, to give you and the rest of the audience a glimmer a little bit into my inside world is I have been one of these guys who's essentially cut cable. So with the exception of watching live sports, I don't see commercials. And I bring this up because this might be just me putting out, be like, hey guys, Joe, why haven't you, been with reality for the last 6.5 years or whatever it was? But watching commercials now, I had this observation during a football game, is so much different than it used to be. And I understand that a big part of this is because it's an election cycle and I'm in a swing state. But this has nothing to do with which candidate or whatever. But we all are getting, long story short, hate messages sent to us through these campaign ads pretty much continuously. Again, whether they're on the person you want to vote for or not. And seeing that around us, knowing that one of the responsibilities of building a successful society, of being holy, is to not spread hate, is to actually spread love, hate being pretty much the opposite of love. This is going to be a multifaceted question here, Father, for this episode. But it is going to be, how do we essentially prepare ourselves so that we don't become an echoing chamber of our team's particular version of hate? And how do we essentially build up a shield so that we don't get triggered and want to go off the edge and hurt people as much as we feel that we're perceived that we're hurt? So that is essentially a very real life thing. Like I said, just observed it here over the last couple of weekends of watching these games. And that's something we're going to be dealing with for a couple of months here. So I think it's a good starting point, because I can tell just for myself, it's starting to get to me. And I've been talking to you every week for the last 7 years. So let's dive in this one specifically.
Yeah, well, it's a great observation from you, Joe, at a couple of levels. One is when you notice something that is irritating, frustrating, hurtful, etc., rather than simply condemning other people for that, you're asking the question, am I doing that also? Can I learn something from that? How can I do better than the thing that's really driving me crazy? So I just think that attitude by itself is already such a remedy. If we were all doing that, and there makes me think of the who is it, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, or maybe Dostoevsky, who said, well, I guess Zosимos from maybe the Brothers Karamazov. Anyway, the idea that I take responsibility. I think it was Solzhenitsyn who was captured, put into a Russian gulag, and was bitter and resentful at what had been done to him. And the conversion came when he was able to take responsibility and say, no, I play a role in this. I played a role in, whether we can name it specifically, like creating this government or creating this, but we take personal responsibility. And we could say, in some sense, that's what Jesus has done in the redemption, is he's taken responsibility for everyone, as if he is the one creating all of the problems. And so he identifies himself with our sin. God made him to be sin, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. So that idea
there before you go deeper, because this is a question spinoff of this, but I think it's direct, because I know you're about to go much, much deeper, and I just want to pause there for a moment. Is that fine? Okay, Jesus definitely did come here to cleanse our sins. There's no fight about that. But he's not the reason that we wake up and sin in the morning. So I want to address that kind of attitude that goes, well, I'm just the cause of everything. I'm the perpetual victim, because that is predominant. And I want to just hit a quick second on that says, yes, there are some bad things that actually happened to you that you couldn't have done anything about. You couldn't have done anything about stuff when you were 4 and your parents' relationship. That's not your fault. And I might have said the terminology wrong about victim or whatever, but I want to address that real quick before we go past it.
Yeah, I'm not saying he comes to be the victim. He actually comes to identify himself with those who have victimized.
Okay.
He doesn't just take all of our suffering on himself. He does that, but he also takes responsibility. A way of expressing that would be that he confesses all our sins as if they were his own when he is hanging on the cross. And so he comes to reconcile, not just by, again, identifying with the victim, but actually identifying with the perpetrator, and still bringing reconciliation through love, creating a pathway of redemption for the perpetrator and a pathway of healing for the victim. And the reality is, and this is again the same point, the reality is we are all perpetrators and we are all victims. And so he's providing a way back on both ends, healing through love and atoning through his own self-offering and identification with our guilt as well. So so there's kind of a lot there, but just focusing on the point that you're making about how do I look at the despicable things other people are doing and not just condemn them? Well, I turn the attention on myself and ask, am I doing this also just in my own way? So somebody is pushing partisan politics on the left side. Am I simply doing the same thing but on the right side? Somebody is pushing religious practice on the trad side. Am I doing the same thing on the liberal side? So it's just really good to see, maybe, and this is kind of the horseshoe image of politics, I guess, that the far left and the far right are actually very close together like a horseshoe, rather than being a great distance from each other like they would be on a straight line. It actually bends together, because the kind of thing that makes it far, extreme, radical is the same thing, even if it expresses itself in maybe a different set of content or something like that. So anyway, just all of that is to say, I love the question. When you see something that's irritating, frustrating, off-putting, that you don't just immediately condemn those people and say, I'm amazing, I don't do that, but ask the question, is there a way that I am doing that? And if so, then how can I learn from that? How can I do better with that? And then in particular, this question about politics, conversation, entering into dialogue, not just having, I forget what you said, the kind of speech that's attacking, we're getting attacked constantly, the sort of negativity, and how can I do that better? Yeah, I think trying to understand where some of these things are coming from, there's always a temptation to be overly simplistic. Oh, he's just a Republican because he's an idiot. Well, that's not helpful. What's the person promoting? Or that guy's just a Democrat because he can't read or something. Well, that's not helpful. What's going on there? Where is the good in it? And how does that good get advanced? Maybe I would disagree with the pathway forward. We talked a little bit, if I'm not mistaken, about maybe some points on immigration, and it's in a totally different context. But just to recognize there are two sides of it. There is a place to protecting borders. There is also a responsibility for those who don't have what they need for human thriving and have a right to, because they're human beings. And okay, so those two principles, if you double down on one, you end up with one policy. If you double down on the other, you end up with another policy. And those may be totally legitimate policies. But can we at least understand what the other side is trying to do, and not just say it's stupid and worthless? So that would be my first proposal, is try to understand the best of your opponent's argument. They rather than setting up a straw man argument, set up a strong man argument or an iron man argument. How would you provide the best argument for the opposite side, rather than trying to present the most flimsy and superficial argument for the opposite side, so that we're aimed not so much on winning as we are on seeking the truth and charity. So I have more to offer, but let me just pause there and get your feedback.
Well, I appreciate that, and sorry for derailing you a little bit earlier with that clarifying question. So, yeah, I agree. It's you do have to look at yourself and look as far as what it is that I can do about this and what it is there. I definitely agree that it's, and I think that this is the part that got morphed somewhere along the way. I think it's more about the how than the who. Like, what are you actually going to do? How are you going to solve this question? Because at the end of the day, I think all I really have heard is platitudes nonstop, but platitudes that have then gone the extra mile that have said that you're a bad person if you don't agree with this. Well, there's no substance to it. So it's like, it's basically like intellectual equivalent of eating cotton candy. It's a lot of quotes from both sides, mostly out of context, and trying to reinforce it with imagery to make it like the worst case scenario. And again, I'm in Pennsylvania, so maybe your senator or governor race is a little bit different, but I think I've pretty much paraphrased modern political advertising, and it naturally, and this is why I think it's insidious. I think it naturally invites you to become part of the message, whether you feel you should do something or you feel bad because you shouldn't do something. And I don't think I've seen a single one for any of the various races about what they actually are going to do. It's just who I am. I can say more fun things that anyone can identify with. And to me, that just seems naturally problematic. And I know it's the way our brains are made. I actually even put a context of this in my book, is that the way our brains remember things is based upon feelings, not upon the actual content. So that's what these campaigns are doing. They just want you to have either strong negative, because it's very easy to do strong negative, or, ooh, that could be nice, feeling towards someone without ever actually remembering the words. Which is why people vote based on how they felt from seeing someone present rather than what they actually said. This is a thing that's always been true with people, which is how some of the worst people have ever come into power. They figured out how to do things, and go to whatever country and historical figure you want to in regards to that. So I look at this and say that's the reality of human life. And because I know that's how our brains work, I would like to try to build a shield around myself to make it right. And I think that intellectual discussion of how could I present their argument in the best case scenario would be great, but I don't even know what their arguments are. Like it has gotten so shallow and undermined. It's like, I did it. It literally will be on election day. I'm going to have to look up what their opinion is, what their plan is on 3 different things that are important to me that I've never heard about, that they've never talked in depth about in the political arena. So that's basically, I guess, the state of our modern election systems. But it's something that is, I believe, intentionally designed to rattle people up. Using the possibility of positivity, but mostly through the prism of negativity and drama. I don't see how there's a way for this interactive audience, being the electorate, the people, benefits from this method of attacking each other, unless we ourselves get better and not fall into its trap. So that's what I'm trying to do, my little part here on Father and Joe, to make us aware that this is a trap that's being sprung upon us. Let's do what we can about it.
Yeah, I always harken back to Neil Postman's excellent work, Amusing Ourselves to Death, which he published back in 1985. And it's just more and more true. But he says, when something becomes a dominant medium, in the 1800s, that was written text. In our time, it's video. He was talking about television, but we would expand that a little bit more broadly. Video, well, television and that kind of format is excellent at entertainment. And the problem is when something becomes a dominant medium, we filter everything through that medium. And when the medium is entertainment, basically, politics, is insofar as they were doing educational television. I don't know how much of that really exists now, but you get things like Sesame Street and the Electric Company, which dumbed a lot of things down. Mr. Rogers was remarkable because he didn't do television. He didn't cast it as entertainment. He actually did educational video, which is a very different mode, which is mostly why when you watch Mr. Rogers, it feels really boring. And we've become used to the high energy, lots of stimulation, rapid change of television. But when you create a dominant medium, when you have a dominant medium and then you start to filter everything through that medium, then good politics means good entertainment. Politics is good insofar as it's entertaining. And so the presidential debates, which in the time of Lincoln and Douglas in the mid 1800s, were according to the dominant medium of the written text, and they debated literally for hours. And their debates were like presentations of formal arguments in paragraphs and chapters, as if they were speaking essays. Now we have everything forced through the most effective presidential debates, effective in the sense that it engages people, it gets wide viewership, and people come back for more, is when it's entertainment, because it's getting filtered through that medium of television, essentially. And then, just as you're saying, everything gets reduced to sound bites, because paragraphs, chapters, and books are not entertaining in the way that sound bites are for television. And so we've just reduced the debate on very complicated and very serious issues. I just named a very small dimension of the immigration issue.
Mhm.
And it's very complicated. It's very hard to get the right policies. There are a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of things to balance. There are a lot of sacrifices to get certain benefits. And making decisions about those things is extremely complicated. And that gets reduced to mudslinging about reductive policies between two people who won't listen to each other, and then rally their team's support behind them, and people repeat their sound bites. And it's like, what is that even doing? And so it's almost like we need to endure the political entertainment season, and then we just all stop paying attention, while politicians at their best used to do real work, and that seems less. They still do real work. I want to be very careful to not just cast everybody into a category, but it's like nobody pays attention to the actual debates that take place and the real compromises that are made. And then the effect is, insofar as I guess people are paying attention, it only gets surfaced in this kind of soundbite way again. And so people, even in the sort of real work in between the electoral seasons, seem to make their decisions based on what will be able to be presented well during an election season, which again is sound bites, headlines, and entertainment. And so it makes it, I really have a hard time with the political space in seeing how we get better from here. I think we're just like incapable of talking to each other, having meaningful disagreements, and exploring complexity in a sustained way. I feel like as a people, we're having a harder time doing that. All of the things we talk about in this podcast about relationships primarily, have just broken down so terribly that we can't listen to each other, that we can't have meaningful disagreements of opinion, that we can't have alternative proposals, that we can't work through pro and con lists and ultimately make a decision that we feel will be best for the most people. Everything becomes sort of self-referential and tribal and headlines.
Yeah, and this is the part that gets me, is that this is like the only area of society that has done this, gone to true baseline, not willing to talk to each other. You don't see this with Coke versus Pepsi. You don't see this kind of mudslinging. You don't see it really anywhere in the successful commercial space. You don't even see it when true passions are ignited. Across this nation, if you listen to this live or you listen to this after the fact, you are going to see hundreds, maybe even thousands example of incredibly passionate fan bases playing each other, going to each other's venues, and you don't see riots and mass murders just because LSU went to Alabama. You don't see any of this. But for some reason, if it's with a D or an R next to you, it's now like almost expected. Like what is going on here? And that's supposed to characterize the nation. When you look at how we actually do interact with each other, whether it be professionally and our passions of sports, just as an easy example, because you literally have 100,000 people all in the same building, most of which on the same team, but many of which aren't, which even shows the bigger example that I'm willing to go there, that there's no real danger. You wouldn't go somewhere where you're 10-1 outnumbered if you thought you were going to get hurt, like the way it's portrayed here in this political spectrum. And it is astounding that they keep saying over and over that we're divided this, that, or the other, when it's really just them because they don't know how to communicate with each other. And that's the only way that they're going about it. It's might be the only thing they agree upon. Let's dumb down the message to Twitter sound bites that fit on a YouTube reel or a Facebook reel or whatever, and try to get it there. And it astounds me. So, Father, I love some of the concrete things that you said here. First, kind of recognize it for what it is. It is baseline reduced to its minimum. And to keep if you feel that tension building up in yourself, start by figuring out what their actual plan is, and then make the strongest version of it with the most sincere ideals that you want to have in your answer, and then judge it. And realize that the starting point is so shallow, so neutrally deprived, it'd be like trying to live your life on cotton candy. And if you want to do this, just go for a week, only sustaining yourself on cotton candy, and then look at yourself in the mirror and visualize what that person would look like. You'd be way worse than that guy who only ate McDonald's, like way worse. But that is the political food that we are being given here. So as you feel boiling intentions, maybe even on election night, just remember that this is not how we are supposed to behave. The electorate are the ones who will control it, and it starts by controlling yourself and putting yourself in a better place. So I know that we're sending this out here, 2 months or so before the election, just something to keep in mind as we approach that space. So we thank you all for listening, and we will be with you again next week.